So good evening and welcome to tonight's meeting of the Lunenburg Municipal Building Design Committee. It is June the 6th at approximately 6:03 p.m. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast over the Lunenburg Public Access channel. The recording of this meeting will be available. The recording of this meeting will be available on the Lunenburg Public Access channel within 24 hours in accordance with the governor's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20. This public meeting is being conducted remotely. The agenda lists all the topics which may be discussed at the meeting and are those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Votes may be taken as a result of these discussions. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by open meeting law. Public participation is encouraged and public comments may be welcome during committee member discussions at the discretion of the chair. And so since we are remote, I just want to note that I do see Brian Leighton, myself, Michael Ray Jeffries, I see Tony Scullin-Brini, Peter Beardmore, Christina Masitis, David Blatt, Greg Roy, and Matt Allison is not with us this evening. So first matter of business is the public comment. Are there any public comments from the public? Seeing that we don't have any public with us, any public comments from the APDC?
None tonight.
And any public comments from the committee members? All right, so I am aware that some members need to step off early tonight. So I think Mr. Leighton needs to leave by 7 p.m. Is there anyone else that also needs to step out a little early this evening? Nope, okay. So the first thing we're supposed to do tonight, I will say I need to recommit already to you guys on this. So the idea was to review a draft position paper on our storage needs and child-related services. With your permission, I'll need to email that over to you guys for approval between meetings. So that way we can get that out to the different boards and committees. Is everyone okay with doing that?
Do we have new information on storage needs, Michael Ray?
No, so no. The intent here is really to have a position that we've kind of already taken of it would be best for the schools and town to focus on digitizing records to decrease needed storage space. And then also if the schools will continue to work on finding, working with us to find alternative locations for some of the evening programs within the school systems or extended day programs within the school systems, if possible, on a temporary.
So I guess my question is, I mean, a position paper is fine. It seems as if from the discussions that I've observed in select board meetings over the last couple of months since we came up with this position, is that there has been considerable developments with respect to what our storage needs are going to be.
Yes.
And so what I'm getting to is, when are we going to know? And has the town manager communicated a timeline whereby we can come up with some sort of new estimate?
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of the, as you know, the funding for the first step of the digitization process on the school side doesn't come into effect until July. And my understanding is that this is a high priority that Heather's going to work on right away and get the ball moving on. But I don't have an estimate yet until we have that contract in place for when that work, the first stages of that work will be done. But I think that there's as an ongoing thing, I do expect that, we don't have any design development money. I do expect that as we go through the year into the fall, that we'll have a better indication of when we expect to have a better understanding of what their storage needs will be. So. Okay,
I don't want to belabor this, but my understanding from the appropriation that we made from the capital plan that we appropriated was that is funding digitization as well as some other
correct
document consolidation projects. My understanding is that is not funding an estimate or planning based on the new information that we have in terms of what our what leeway we now have when it comes to digitization, right? So in my mind, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because if I don't understand this, that I most likely don't understand this, but in my mind, we have new information based on what we could prospectively do with respect to digitization and disposal of documents, more so than we had even when this capital planning article was conceived back in late 2021. So that's doing work. It's doing a quantity of work that we agreed to, but there's additional opportunity available to us when it comes to digitization and disposal that we weren't even aware of 6 months ago.
Yep.
And so in my mind, what we need to do is an assessment of that information relative to whatever we calculated a year or two ago in the TCP project, and then come back with new numbers based on that information for each function in town. And I understand that that's a lot of work, but I don't think it requires an appropriation. I think it just requires work. But again, I could be mistaken about all of this, but please correct.
No, I think, Peter, that you're dead on everything you said. I think that what maybe we're having a disconnect on is that ultimately what we need to have a total storage space needs number from the town, and we need to have a total storage space needs number from the schools. That although Heather is in a position with certain information now to make a best estimate, that we will be able to make a better estimate once the project is underway and there's an identification of just how many records are going to be able to get purged. Because that's a big component of this, is significantly decreasing what we have that we're currently storing, and then as we go forward, a digitization process, so that way everything is being digitized as we go forward. My expectation is that as we go into the fall and that this work is underway, that we'll have a better indication of kind of what percentage of stuff is being saved, what is not, and I think that we'll have a better educated guess in a couple of months from now on what the town's needs are. Now, on the school side, they haven't undertaken this kind of project. And so the point of the position paper is really to get it out there to them sooner, that this is something that we would like for them to focus on. And that way, with the intent being that it decreases overall square footage. My comment about the appropriation was that when we get to the point that we're looking to design something, I think that's the point at which, when we're looking for appropriating more, when we're looking to get more funding to be able to design whatever solution is that we come up with, that to me is the drop dead point, that we have until that point before we need to get all this information.
So I would just, if I could add one little bit of detail here,
sure,
Michael Ray, in terms of what I think we need. I think we need a few columns in this analysis. We need what our total storage space need is, probably by department. Because the way I'm thinking of this, and again, I could be completely wrong, I've never worked for a municipal government, is that there's sort of long-term storage needs, right? Like stuff that we just have to have somewhere.
Yep.
And then there's short-term storage needs, like it needs to be in the town clerk's office, or it needs to be in the assessor's office. And I think that if we're going to go forward at some point, looking for an appropriation, we should at least have that conceptualized in terms of not only how much space do we need, but how much space do we need as part of any given function.
Correct. I think the data that I emailed out, we do have that information, Peter.
Yeah, but it's old. It's based on old numbers.
I think
old rules, I guess, is a better way to put it.
I think that what's good from it is the short-term stuff. I think that the last go around, the intent with this board was really to keep and I see your hand, Christina, I'm going to call you next. I see the short-term stuff was really, I think, our focus in our last kind of round of doing this while we were named the TCP design committee. and I think we really did drill down, and other members can chime in if you don't agree, but I think that we drilled down a lot of that short-term stuff. And I think the space savings really are on the long-term storage, because that was thousands of square feet. And so if we can eliminate all that long-term storage needs, or the vast majority of it, then that is where I think we're really trying to save. The stuff in office, all the short-term stuff, I think we've already really minimized that as is. But Greg, Roy, I see your hands up. So Christina and then Greg.
So just off of Peter, we have clear definition from the state at this point at what can be digitalized and what can't, because
Christina,
your mic is
we just lost you.
Yeah.
Or we heard you, but your volume
Too far away from
decreased.
the mic, maybe.
sorry, can you hear me? Okay, so I guess what I was to Peter's point. Oh my God.
You're in and out.
All right, is that
Hold the mic to your.
it's the computer setting.
You're in and out.
Yeah, Christina, you may need to drop off and join back in. So
Or change inputs.
Is that better?
Or go off video.
it is better.
So what I'll drop off.
Okay. All right, Mr. Roy.
I missed a meeting, or maybe even two. So I'm glad to see that we're tackling this space needs, because something you just said about, when it was called the TCP committee, we definitely discussed storage needs mainly by department, but in my view, we never looked at it from a global standpoint. I just felt I was left feeling like there's probably room for efficiency relative to the storage needs. If we were to look at this from a town perspective and not just, I understand what Peter's saying. There are definitely things that the assessing department needs and the planning department needs and the conservation. But I just felt like if we looked at this from a global standpoint, and I'm really glad to see that the town is doing this now, that there's definitely got to be room for efficiency. So, I think that's a very good thing. And I think I said it before too, that even if we need to keep a bunch of records by statute, that's not to say we can't digitize them all and provide and have them archived digitally, and make them a lot less accessible. Put them in a place that's a lot less accessible, as long as we can access them. As long as we're meeting the, and I don't understand the law relative to this, but it seems to me that as long as we're meeting the statutory requirements, it seems to me there's no reason why we can't digitize everything and have a system where we can access everything, even if it's something that we have to keep a paper copy of, because the paper copy could be stored in some location in a lot cheaper manner than $300 or $400 a square foot, like we were talking about with the TCP renovation. So that's it.
Brian.
Thanks. Yeah, I would agree with Greg too. I had a couple points though. I know that the public definitely didn't want to spend a lot of money on a new building with a giant amount of space for storage. Also, we talked at the school committee meeting as well about this, and it was, I think the desire to do it is there, but the worry about the funding. We know that the town got the 60,000+ to get the funding for it, but the schools, they don't want to take it away from, we're not going to want to take it away from, students and increase class sizes or take away teachers. So whether it goes through capital planning or the town manager has extra resources that she was able to get that she can also apply to digitizing with the schools. I think the school committee's open to suggestions, but definitely concerned about funding.
I think it should absolutely be a capital plan request from the school department this year.
So do I. Mr. Blatt.
So to add the numbers up, there was two rooms in the original TC Passios plan, one for the town and one for the schools, and it totaled over 2,000 square feet.
Yeah.
That was for old record storage alone, never mind the department storage.
I think I came up with almost like 4,000 once you start adding in some of the additional storage kind of, in addition to those like long-term rooms, we also had some random storage throughout the building
Yes.
that was related. And I came to closer to 4,000 square feet.
Yeah, some of the other storages were more for like chairs for the meeting rooms or tables and things like that. But just to give you an idea, just designated as school and town were two rooms totaling 2,000.
All right. So the intent then is what I will do is I will make sure I get this out to you guys to look at. I'll keep it on the agenda so that way we talk about it at our next meeting and then we make additional modifications to that position. And really, I think that the key point of the position paper is to disseminate it and to share that information out and make sure everyone's aware of it. And also, as Mr. Layton does his Facebook updates, is to also inform the community that this is a step that we're trying to pursue. Are there any other comments on this topic before we move on to program prioritization? No? Okay. All right, so program prioritization. So the purpose of this agenda topic is to discuss, and this is something that we were all going to kind of talk about, how we evaluate space needs and requests. So I do want to try to limit this conversation tonight to about 45 minutes, and we'll see how we go. If we need more time, then we'll take more time. But just as a kind of a starting point, that may be a good guide. So the question before us is, we've gone through this exercise where we've worked with the engineering and architectural company to figure out what our space needs requests are. How do we want to reevaluate those requests? So I heard one thing already, which is storage, but if we can just kind of have this discussion on how we want to reapproach this. And Greg, do you mind if I call upon you, since I know that you had a lot of work previously on this, if you wouldn't mind just starting this discussion for us today?
Sure. So, and again, I apologize here. I missed the last meeting. It's good to see your pretty faces again. So we're looking at kind of taking another look at the way we prioritize space in the TCP project. Am I understanding that correctly? Yeah. So when we did it before, we spent a good amount of time, I'd say 2 to 4 meetings, inviting the various groups of people, other than the town departments, other than like we didn't have planning board come and the town clerk and all that, but we had all the other people like school department in particular, Boys and Girls Club, Lions Club, PAC. I'm missing a few, I'm sure, but come and present. And then we sort of just lined them all up and we all came up with a ranking. We all ranked them, what our priority would be. And then we did an average of how they ranked. I don't have that analysis at the tip of my finger at my fingertips this evening, but that's how we did it before. And based on that analysis, we basically just applied the space needs that we had for priority 1. Okay, we have leftover space, so we went and did priority 2. Okay, we have leftover space, so we did 3, and on down the list. And the ones that didn't have, when we ran out of space, we sort of cut it out. I mean, I'm summarizing and truncating, but that's more or less what we did. I thought that was a very hard process. There was folks in town that were probably, it was a hard process because there was definitely more need than we had space in the building. But I think that now the analysis might be slightly different. And then again, just to, I think to remember something that Peter Beardmore said, you know, I think even on the town meeting floor 6 months ago or 7 months ago was, you know, we filled the building that we had available. You know, we figured out how much space we had available and we prioritized to fit the space that we had, not necessarily an analysis based on what our true need is. You know, if we were to start from scratch, more or less, you know, what is our actual need? You know, the analysis is different. That, you know, that we had a building that was whatever 55,000 square feet. You know, would that analysis have turned up something different and come up with a different cost estimate if we weren't starting with a 55,000 square foot, I'm rounding, sorry, 55,000 square foot school building. So this is all a preamble to hopefully other people chiming in. I think that the analysis probably ought to be a little different. You know, I think that we need to really things like taking really hard look at storage space is great, but really drilling down on the use. I also think I've had a conversation with Mr. Scolambrini as well. I also wonder if it's appropriate to really drill down on the square footages that each of the department is asking for. That maybe is a little bit outside of this, well, space needs. So, you know, we didn't really question the findings that the architect and the architects over time had come up with relative to each department's request for space. And I'm not saying that they're out of whack. I'm just saying that, you know, we probably ought to really drill down and be convinced that we're programming only enough space, you know, only the space that we need, and then be really intentional about future proofing in a way that's really flexible so that, you know, we're not necessarily just throwing in an extra space in everybody's suite, but we're really being intentional about, you know, how we're going to manage future growth and things. So, so anyway, I don't have a real good like outline of how we should proceed, but that sort of hopefully that sets the plate or sets the stage for where we were.
Thank you for that, Mr. Roy. I just want to come back to Christina in case she had anything that she wanted to offer before I call on Tony.
Oh, sorry, I kind of missed like the beginning half, but I was just gonna ask if there's like an official document from the state yet stating what can and can't be digitalized, or if that's a town by town thing, because I think kind of to Mr. Beardmore and I think even to Mr. Roy, which I heard, so I don't know if anyone else touched upon it, but if we're gonna go to these different entities, we want to make sure that we're all starting at the same place as what really they can push back on and say they need storage for, and what we can push back and say, well, this can be digitalized and kept somewhere else.
So Christina, thank you for bringing that up. You know, one of the components of this position paper that has yet to be finished to be written is that was part of the request, is that if they're going to say that records have to be kept on hand, school or the town, they need to identify where that requirement comes from. So that way, you know, this is certainly, you know, we trust what staff are saying, but I think due diligence is also to verify and then to be able to point out to the public, you know, this is the law that says that we must do X, Y, and Z, and this is why we have to comply. Tony?
Well, first of all, hopefully you can hear me. I'm actually in Ohio. I'm celebrating my mother-in-law's 90th birthday this weekend, and we head back to
Happy
Massachusetts.
birthday.
Yeah, so I am hoping you can hear me,
Yes.
because I am quite some distance from Massachusetts, and hopefully I'm not violating any open meeting law by participating in a
No,
Massachusetts
not at all.
meeting from the state of Ohio.
Not at all.
Okay, so and with regards to to the space needs and the space priority, Michael, I sent you a fairly lengthy document by email. And hopefully you'll get a chance to take a look at that. But and then maybe share it with others, because I think it'll fill in the gaps with what I'm going to try and report. I took an entirely different position than what Greg Roy just described, where you had a building and you said, all right, it's this big, what can we put in it? How much would it cost to do that? What I did was I looked at the space requirements and the square footage requirements that were reported back under the column that was October of 2020 on the spreadsheet that Michael Ray had sent to us. And if you add up that square footage, and then you do something, and then you do another exercise to kind of check that square footage, I think what the staff has asked for is reasonable. And there are 3 levels of space needs according to industry standards: 90 to 150 square feet per person. And that's a pretty compact, pretty dense area. And that includes storage, that includes things like restrooms, that includes conference rooms. The next level up is 150 square feet to 250 square feet. And in fact, the GSA generally uses 150 square feet when they decide to source out real estate space for governmental organizations. The 150 square feet figure is pretty much a GSA standard. And then you have 250 to 500 square feet. And what the industry describes that are office space requirements that you might find on a law firm, where you have a lot of individual private offices, and hence they consume a lot of square feet per person. So I took kind of the middle of the road approach, and I said, all right, we got 50 people, and I'm going to multiply that times 250 square feet. And the 50 includes, folks like the select board men, because they need to have space too. And then, so you come up with about 12,500 square feet, much different than 55,000. So that was one of the things that I did. And oh, by the way, I then multiplied that times $750 a square foot, which I think, Greg, is on the very high side of what the estimates were for the $55,000 or 55,000 square foot project. And that comes up to about $9.4 million. And if you're looking at providing new or newly renovated space for 50 employees, and they're going to get 12,500 square feet to divvy up in conference rooms, storage space, private offices, cubicles, I think we could sell a $9.4 million project. So, but then the second half of this is there's a bunch of things that aren't related to town administrative functions, that need to be satisfied. And some of those space needs I think are very high priority needs, like, the extended daycare, clearly the ACE education piece. That's while we may agree or disagree as to whether this should be something that this committee should be involved with, or if Brian and his committee at the school in the school world should be involved with. That is a bona fide need, and someone, whether it be the town or the school, has to deal with that. So that's where the costs really start to rise, because those square footage requirements are significant. And if you use the $750 square foot cost estimate, you could get to $33 million if you wanted to satisfy all of those space requirements. And so that's the approach that I took, is to say, what do we really need for town administrative functions? And then have a break point and say, what do we need that are valid priority projects for the school and the community? And then add those in after you've dealt with the 12,500 square feet. And I think that both Town Hall and Ritter could probably satisfy, with the right types of design, the 12,500 square feet. And if we couldn't, we would consume a little bit of space at TC Passios, to satisfy those administrative requirements. One last comment. There are certain town functions that have to be made accessible to sexual offenders. And those sexual offenders can't be in buildings where kids are. And that's a legal issue that we would have to take into consideration if we decide to merge things like extended daycare and the ACE program, into TC Passios with town functions. We got to keep those separate as as I understand it, and I may be wrong about that, but that's something that has to be looked at by the appropriate legal authorities, before we start meshing kid stuff with town stuff that requires, some sort of a barrier between sex offenders that need town services. So that's it from my perspective. And Michael Ray, it's a long piece. I don't know whether you want to share that with the others, but I did take a fair amount of time when I pulled that together to think about what how the space approach should be. And it's entirely different. I didn't look at the building and say, how can we use the building? I said, what do we have that we need to provide functions for? And then what's the square footage requirement?
Yeah, I thought that was some really good information, Tony, that you sent over, and I will distribute it after the meeting. One of the things with open meeting law is that although you can send the information to a chair or to a clerk, that I can't disseminate it until we really are, if it's an opinion or something for deliberation from a member, I can't disseminate it until the meeting or after the meeting.
I understand that. That's one of the reasons why I only sent it to you.
Yep, I will share
Okay.
it.
Alrighty.
So thank you for those comments. And Peter.
So I appreciate Mr. Scolambrini's. It's interesting. I think we came to similar conclusions, perhaps, or would lead in the direction of similar conclusions, but I took a completely different approach. And my approach was what I'm calling a priority decision criteria for determining new municipal buildings. So I do not have expertise enough to say we should assess the assessor's needs versus the tax collector's needs in a different way. Like I don't know how to do that. But what I do have the ability to do is think of what I perceive as our most pressing needs, how much money I think we have, and what we have for available resources in terms of existing buildings and properties. And so I came up with 7 criteria in order that, by the way, jives with my king for a day scenario as well. So I'll briefly go through the 7 criteria. And I wouldn't even call these criteria, they're just priorities. First is to determine the budget. What can we afford with enough debt capacity to address Turkey Hill in a decade? And I think that to determine this budget in a way that does not have us chasing our tails for the next 6 months is the town manager, the select board, and the finance committee need to come to a consensus around a budget number that accounts for the limitation around the 10-year out project for Turkey Hill. Doesn't have to be precise, but it has to be something that we can all agree to. Second priority is we need to address functional municipal and school administrative office space. Not necessarily in the same place, but we need to address both. Each department should have the space that they need to do their job, including meeting space, but not necessarily public meeting space, and service the public, i.e. have a front desk, have a waiting area, storage needs pending the need for storage, and possibly address future needs for population growth or what have you. Third is to preserve our most precious historical buildings, Town Hall and Ritter in particular. Fourth is to minimize impact to all functions during construction and transition. In other words, we can't throw anybody out on the street while we're doing this. Fifth is address PAC. We have never put a dime of municipal money into PAC. It's all been funded through cable fees. I think that they provide an essential municipal service, and we need to find an appropriate place to house them. And by the way, that need will only increase over time as we move into a increasingly digital and remote world. as evidenced by one participant participating from Ohio today. 6 is we need to address education programming space. And 7 is we need to address community space needs, including public meeting space, community activities, and organizations. Now, I put these in 7, a list of 7 different things. I don't think we can accomplish all of them. But in terms of what we can do, and perhaps even the order that we do them, I think that this is an appropriate list of priorities that we should have in determining what we do and how we go about doing it.
Thank you, Peter. That's really solid feedback there. Christina.
So I just have 2 questions, or I guess a question and a comment. So for Peter, when you said make a budget for, is that a budget for like what would be done in all buildings? What would be done if it's a new building? Like, would it be broken down? Because I think one of the big things this committee and the town gets very stuck on is the cost of things. So would you say overall we have like $20 million to do whatever we're doing, whether it's build, repair, or it's 20 million just to build or 20 million just to repair? Just kind of like clarifying that.
Yeah, so I take on the new car analogy here, right?
Okay.
Which is I have the itch to buy a new car,
Mhm.
but the car that I want and the car that I need and that which I can afford are 3 entirely different things. But I'm going to probably do what I can afford, which in this case is not buy a new car.
Okay.
So I'm saying, what can we afford?
Okay.
So start with that number and work backwards.
Yeah, because I think with the current climate, that whatever number we give, it's going to be sticker shock to the taxpayers, and they're going to be very hesitant on whatever we propose at this point. And it kind of goes back to what Tony said, where it either gets passed to the town or gets passed to the schools. Well, either way, it
It's
gets
all coming out of our
back to the
pocket.
town.
You're,
So,
you're
yeah.
absolutely right. And I'm doing this. The approach that I came here in terms of mentioning Turkey Hill in the #1 priority is because in my mind, it is part of the #1 priority. We have a job to do here, but we cannot do our job and torpedo an out project.
Mhm.
Right. So, and part of the salesmanship that you mentioned, Christina, in terms of how we sell this to the town is not, we tried build to the need, air quotes, didn't work, cost too much, right? Well, how do we figure out what that number is? In my mind, we even tried, and it's been the source of frustration for our select board. Oh, we'll do a survey at town meeting. Well, how's that working out for us? We're 0 for 2 in the last year around following the results of surveys as guidance for what we're going to do. So in my mind, let leaders be leaders. Insist on guidance and decisions from our leaders. Who are our leaders in these matters? Well, in my mind, absolutely the town manager, absolutely the select board. And because this is a financial consideration, I think that the finance committee should have a voice in this as well. If we can get all 3 to agree to something that we all agree is a financially responsible approach, I think we can sell that to town meeting.
I also think you kind of have to get the school board involved in whatever we do, because they carry so much of the town weight and money at this point, that if you almost have them and obviously other committees on board, like the historic committee, if we can save the buildings, I think just the more people we get involved
Again,
at this point, the
Again,
better.
a budget number is a budget number, right? So there is a bit of calculus here, right? The school committee has a formula. I don't know if they've all agreed to it, but there is a formula in place that we've used in the past. It has not been updated to determine what the renovation or replacement cost is of TC Passios, right? The town employs financial advisors, right? Like we can do this work, right? And come up with a number that is vetted by our financial advisors and that is going to leave enough money left over to accomplish our educational needs. And whatever that number is, if it's $10 million, if it's $20 million, if it's somewhere in the middle, I don't know what it'll be. I really don't know because the work hasn't been done yet. But I think our #1 priority should be to do that work first.
And then I guess my other question kind of to you, Peter, is like these side projects because of this, like the asbestos removal or the digitalization, would that fall under our umbrella, or is that going to go off on separate, like town voted in?
That's
that
a good
would eat up
question. Yeah,
lot of
so I
it.
don't, I think with respect to how it falls in terms of what we wind up deciding we need to do, right? So let me give you an example. I'll give you a preview for my King for a Day. I'm not solving the TC Pasio's building asbestos problem in my King for a Day problem, right? Why? Because by the time we get down and knocking down the north wing of TC Pasio's in my plan, we'll be applying for retirement probably, right? I mean, it's going to be a ways out. So I have not included that in my plan, but that's not to say that it doesn't need to get done. It's just I haven't included it.
Okay.
I think we've seen it too in the capital plan. There's a lot of time asbestos removal in the capital plan for lots of buildings.
All right, Dave or Brian, do either one of you guys want to chime in on any of the how we prioritize going forward?
I was going to
I just
yield to
want-
Brian.
I just wanted to mention what Greg Roy had talked about, just the previous priority list. I had that from a previous minutes, so I could share that with everybody. I don't know if I need
Please.
to share my screen, I could do that,
Sure.
or I can just. This is just from the minutes from October, well, a while back. So I can share my screen. So we had town offices, 1, school department offices, 2, PAC was 3, school programs 4, community kitchen 5, Lions 6, and Boys and Girls Club 7. So that was just from our minutes from many meetings ago.
All right. Mr. Blunt, would you like to chime in
I have a-
before I go?
May I ask a question of Brian? What school programs?
Those are the 4 programs that the superintendent had talked about before.
Okay, thank you.
So guys, I appreciate all the input I'm hearing from folks. I actually would take a different approach to start a priority. And I would look at the priority first as if it is determining in our minds for, I agree that we need to have a finance of how much our budget is and work backwards. But I also believe that we need to first determine whether we want to mix schools with town or not. And that's also a priority. So where there's a lot of emotions behind that, and a lot of feelings from the townspeople on this front. As Tony mentioned earlier, it might be some legal ramifications of combining the two, but I think it's something we need to determine. On that, I also look at the historical buildings differently. I personally look at the Ritter being the historical building in town. I look at Town Hall as being an old church that the church didn't even want. So it's as if I just got somebody's barn. I took a barn and brought it over to my property, and that's about it. But that's what I believe, is that I believe Ritter is the most historic and the nicest, and basically exemplifies the town of Lunenburg the most in this scenario. I do agree with the idea that if we looked at it and we looked at what we really needed for spaces, if this was going to be for office spaces, is much lower than the number that came up for the TC Pasio's project. The Pasio's project was totally based on, we had this much square feet, we had this many needs, and we tried to fill it as best we could, figuring that a tear down was going to be just as expensive, just not really save us much in the long run, except for having to tell people to go away. And it really wasn't a thing. I also understand that if we're talking about Turkey Hill Middle School, then it's time to talk about whether some of those functions that are in TC Pasio's get moved to Turkey Hill, because obviously that would cut down on other costs such as busing and other expenses that you have with the school programs as well. Because, after all, we had, you wouldn't have to take them and drag half the students to another building at the designated hours before and after school. Other than that, the assessment, I do believe the assessment should be something that we take on as more of what we would like in the building not as much the square footage. I think the square footage that the people are asking for, that the town offices, well, I'd say specifically the town offices are asking for, is not unreasonable. They're used to working in a small confined space, and I don't think they're asking for that much more. The only thing they would be doing is sharing more conference rooms than before. So that's just my quick opinion, to save you some time on your 45 minutes there, Michael Ray.
All right, thanks, Dave. You have a comment on that, Peter?
It's really a question for Dave. Dave, you mentioned school and town. You mentioned a lot of things, which, by the way, your historical assessment, I completely disagree with, but I think that that's a discussion for another day. Where do you prioritize town offices, school offices, and school programming functions? Because I think that was the assignment. It's not, do we want to put them together or do we want to keep them separate? It's where do they fall with respect to priorities?
Okay, for me, based on the discussions and based on what I'm hearing about what we're planning for what the thoughts are for the future, I take priority number 1 as town offices, priority number 2 as town offices, priority number 3, school office, and priority number 4, school office. Priority number 5 would be other things. So if you can see, I'm looking at a building. I'm looking at an administrative building only.
Dave, would you mind just repeating that? Because I think on my end, I heard the same thing twice.
You did. You heard town offices as 1 and 2, school offices 3 and 4, and everything else far behind. Because I really believe that we need at this point that this town is in the mood for an administrative building. It's either one or the other. Either you make an administrative building or you make a community building. And the community building needs a lot of space. The administrative building you can do in as much on a budget, I would say.
So Dave, could I, and we're getting ahead of ourselves, but could I offer another
Sure.
option, or another question, which is, in your mind, do the school administrative offices and the town administrative offices need to be the same building?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
I look at this as that my top priority is the town.
Okay.
Because
Fair
that's as somebody who's, if especially at my point, I'm not looking at dealing with the school that much. I deal with the Boys and Girls Club more than the school. And the biggest pain in the neck in this town is having to go to 2 buildings to deal with the town right now and cross that busy street.
And it's awful for our employees. So Tony, before I call you, I just want to offer my own opinions here about what I think, how I think we should prioritize. So I think that maybe I'm kind of in between most of what's already been said, but for me, it's administrative needs of the town plus 25%. It's administrative needs of the school and plus 25%. And then also a gym and a kitchen, and then extended day and all the that we need to have a long-term plan for extended day. That's how I would prioritize. That's kind of the top of the list. But there's also, and this goes into part of the next part of the agenda, but I want to offer a couple opinions or comments on that. Going throughout this process for the last couple of years, I've heard a lot of comments. I've heard someone say to me, I pay your salary, which, would be great, but, unfortunately.
We do pay your salary.
You do. And I appreciate every penny of it.
Right. Checks in the mail,
but my salary is $0.
Yeah.
I've heard comments, that the town's going to do what they want to do anyway, that the opinions of the people don't matter. I've heard people say, I'm not spending $1 more on kid services in Lunenburg. But I think that ultimately how I look at it is, what do parents need to get to work? That, if we want to keep people in our community, that we have to me, this is a question that we have to answer. That right now there's a service that we're providing to parents, that there's a safe place for their children to go, not just during the school year, but also in the summertime as well. And that's what extended day provides for parents. And the costs are affordable. You know, childcare is outrageously expensive. And so, you know, extended day, on the other hand, is more reasonable and is more affordable. But we have to, in my opinion, the town has a responsibility of assisting parents with providing them with a safe place for their children to go before and after school during the school year, and also in the summertime for a couple of hours when they have to go to work. I think the town has an ongoing responsibility to our senior population, who receive generally 0.25% of our tax dollars, even though they make up about 30% of our tax base. And we have to continue to provide services to our senior community. They don't ask for much. They do ask for a gym. And so I think that to me is a must. And then our town seal is this image of a farmer, of a farm. And we say all the time, we're a farming community, but we are and no secret to anybody, we're one of the fastest growing communities in town over the last 10 years. And I believe our population has increased by 40% in the last 20 years. That's pretty substantial, and that's a lot of growth. And, you know, if we want to maintain that rural identity, we need to do more for our farmers. And what we keep hearing from the agricultural community is that they need a commercial kitchen. That maintaining commercial kitchens are expensive, and that if we can find a way to provide a commercial kitchen, that there's a model that's out there that could be self-sustaining, that the town makes an initial investment, but that through renting the space that it can maintain itself. It also provides an opportunity because, you know, we're only 2 towns away from Devens, and every weekend is a drill weekend for the Marines or for the Army. It is the only really Army installation that's around. And so there's thousands of people that go through Devens every single week, every single month rather, thousands of people, and they all have to get fed. There's a business out there that can be had. There's a kitchen, and someone can get a business going to provide catering services to those units. You know, to me, these are all things, and if we can bring in some of our fresh vegetables on top of it, even better. So I think that it's important, you know, again, that we focus on the needs of the town, specifically administrative, schools administrative, but that we have to keep in mind the services that we're already providing to our seniors, to our parents. We have to continue to provide those services. And why I think it's so important, because I don't know if this future building is going to need to have extended day in it. But, you know, the question that you brought up, Tony, about registered sex offenders. Registered sex offenders are entitled to receive town services. I think most of them are aware of the restrictions that are imposed on them. And, you know, when you have a building that is designed so that way you have separate entrances, you know, if you have a child entrance for extended day that has controlled access, then there is no conflict. The main thing is not having people in that generalized space where children are learning or recreating in. Having said that, you know, I think that when we go into our plans for King for a Day or Queen for a Day, you know, I certainly have been thinking outside the box, and I think that when it gets to my turn on this, I will have a kind of present an idea that is outside of the box. But that's kind of how I would prioritize. And Tony, are there any questions on that before I move on to Tony? Peter, you look like you're deep in thought.
I guess my question is, Michael Ray, is you outlined a number of things well beyond what everybody else talked about, to include a gym and a commercial kitchen. Do you think that has to be solved within the parameters of this budget and plan of record as we go forward? I'm assuming in phases, or is that just a lower priority item that we can move forward without having those requirements fully sussed out?
Yeah, you know, I try to look at things from the perspective of what will pass. And you know, if we were just coming up with the best and brightest ideas, this problem would have been solved. And in my opinion, the best idea, the best and brightest, is the community center new building that we've already presented to the town. The problem is that I can't with a straight face ask the town to spend $40 million. I wouldn't want to spend that, but to me, that's the best and brightest. So everything is less than that. So now we're chipping away at what we're not going to do, what services we're not going to provide, so that way we can get a number that's palatable. When we think about what's going to pass, seniors currently are using a gym. If we stop the use of a gym, we could bank on many members of the senior community who participate in the senior community in town. You lost their vote. I believe that. If we have a plan that does not present or provide for a commercial kitchen, given how many years it has taken to even get to this point, I don't think there's any confidence that we're going to solve that problem in the next 20, 30 years. And if farmers start selling off their property, I mean, we all drive down Lancaster Ave. If Stillman started selling off land down Lancaster Ave because they needed it to remain viable, or another company or another farm started selling off their property, as we've seen happen over the last 20 years. I mean, it's happening on Flat Hill right now. Apple Orchard's going away and making room for homes and houses. I don't know if we find ourselves in a better position because of that. So I think we lose the vote of some of the farming community if we have a package that doesn't address any of their needs. And then if we don't resolve right now, TC Passios provides extended day. If we somehow lose extended day and we don't have a plan for it that's viable and well thought out, that gives people the warm and fuzzy, that it won't be problematic for them, or that they're not going to have a problem sending a kid to extended day, we lose a lot of the parents who rely upon that service. So losing the gym and kitchen, to me, we lose farmers and we lose seniors on supporting any kind of plan. And then we're only talking about how many people are willing to pay for a building that's for town administrative needs and for school administrative needs. I hate to say it, I don't think that there's an appetite in town for people to spend a lot of money on those services. And it's because, you know, as we went through the reports, the buildings look okay from the outside. People drive by, they see two pretty buildings, and they don't understand what the problem is. And so, you know, what do? Do you let the buildings fall apart on the outside while addressing the interior issues? You know, we've taken kind of the opposite approach, where we've addressed the exterior issues and haven't addressed the interior stuff. So I think any plan that we do, we have to account for who the voters are, who shows up to town meetings. Town meeting is an overwhelming, in my opinion, farming and senior community, and with a sprinkle of whoever has a special interest. Tony?
I have one question for Peter, and that is, how do you decide, using your analogy, how would it be best decide what the budget figure should be? You know, using like what price car are we going to buy, and how do we determine that, Peter? How would you do that?
I thought we were going for the Bentley myself, but that's okay.
I think we tried that. So Tony, the background on this is that we did agree upon a formula a couple of years ago to determine what the cost of this new Turkey Hill replacement would be. Okay, so that is a factor in the calculus. That number needs to be updated, but it would be a factor. Let's say it's $30 million. Okay, so you know that you have to have that $30 million in debt capacity in 2032 when you start taking out bonds, 2033 maybe, right? We have a limit of 11% of debt capacity of our total levy to go to debt service. Right now, I believe it's around 9%, but it's falling off precipitously because we're paying off some old projects from 20 years ago over the next few years. So the financial calculus goes into, okay, if we're going to borrow X amount of money next year or the year after, then it's going to probably put us up to 11%, you know, in that neighborhood. We'll start paying that down. What's the debt capacity going to be in 2033? And there are much smarter than me financial experts who figure that stuff out. And I've done it back of the napkin as I illustrated last fall when I got the numbers, the 30 and the $40 million numbers. You can do it using the Excel spreadsheets that have been provided. But number one, the financial consultants never put their seal of approval on any of this last year. I think they need to going forward. And the town manager and the select board and the finance committee, for that matter, never put any kind of parameters around what that financial plan should be. And in my mind, it's compulsory. I think that is the reason why it failed, because there was no financial plan. You could have, now there was no mathematical argument that you could drop $30 million in the middle of this and the financial plan would work, but there was never it should be 20 million or 15 or 25. And I think we need to come to that analysis.
So you think you could come up to that? You could come up with a bogey, a 10 million, 15 million,
Yeah, I mean,
25 million.
it's horseshoes and hand grenades, right? I mean, it's just not, this is imprecise, but it should be enough to persuade a voter that there's some logic here, right? And to date, we've had a complete absence of that logic.
Okay, thank you.
Brian, I'd like to give, so we're kind of at time here, and I think we've had a good discussion, but we will come back to this for sure. This is not the end of this part of this discussion. So, really, I think part of the goal tonight is to get these ideas out there, to have a good discussion on kind of how we're thinking about reprioritizing. But I also, the next phase of this tonight is to start talking about our King for a Day plans and what we would do if it was up to us individually to decide what to do and how to do it, to kind of start vetting that process and hearing from one another what we think. But I want to pause. I know Brian has to leave here soon, just to give Brian the opportunity to speak on this or the next topic. Brian?
Thanks. Sorry. Did you want me to go through my scenario?
Sure, please.
Okay. So I cheated. I came up with two, but along with whatever you were saying, I think it was the idea of cost savings and making a realistic one that we could sell. So that's kind of what I went off with. And there was two concerns that I had. It was like, okay, do people really want a new build? So that's an option. And then the other option is if we don't have to rebuild new. So scenario one is the town wants a new town hall and they want it at the old primary school land. So a new town hall first would be built with a community center, PAC would be there on the old primary land, no kitchen to save money, no gym to save money. The schools would be utilized and the rec department utilized to save money on building additional kitchen and gym, no school offices in there or school programming to save money on that new build. The Ritter occupants would be moved to the TCP space or other town property space available. And then the Ritter and Brooks could be made available for school offices and programming using town funds or capital plan funds for remodels and renovations of those buildings. The TCP programming would stay in TCP until a new space was available, or the TCP would be torn down. Then after that, the town hall offices would be moved to the new town hall, and then TCP would be torn down by 2024. I believe that has to be torn down by that date. Otherwise, it's a historical building. The old town hall would be used for rented office space or meeting space or community space, maybe artist booths, but kind of the town manager and select board could see fit to whatever they want to do with those buildings. The Turkey Hill new build would be on the old TCP land with added space for educational programming in need of space, like the extended day program and such. The primary school gym could be used for extended day, and maybe the basketball programs could be encouraged to use it on the weekends or after 6 p.m. on the weekdays. And then the middle high school cafeteria space could be utilized for Turkey Hill extended day as an additional resource to just help out with extended days. My second scenario, if anything goes, would be not to build new, tear down the TCP building, build the new Turkey Hill located at the TCP property, and then take the Turkey Hill building and remodel the old Turkey Hill, thinking that the Turkey Hill building is better than the TCP building. Move the town hall, Ritter offices, PAC, community groups, school offices, programming, everything to Turkey Hill, because it should have the space. And then Ritter and Town Hall could be renovated and rented out by the town manager and select board. So those are my scenarios, but I do have to run. I have a meeting, so feel free to discuss and enjoy your night.
Thank you, Brian. So I would ask, as Brian leaves, that we just allow the members to share their viewpoints on that, and then we'll come back to who we want to tear apart first.
Should we be submitting these in writing, Michael Ray?
Say again?
Should we be submitting these in writing?
It would be ideal if you did after this meeting, yes. So that way we can kind of put them together in one main document. Yep. Okay. You know, I would normally want to ask for someone else, but Brian said something that I want to touch because it's very similar to what my thoughts were as well. I had the privilege of walking I went to Turkey Hill Middle School, and now it's an elementary school, but I went there and I requested a tour of the building, and I had one on Friday because I haven't been inside of that school as far as a real walk around since I graduated 8th grade. And I was there for a couple of reasons. Really, I would say the primary motivation of being there was to look for the disposition of the building, to see if the building is in a poor condition, or if it can easily be converted, and then also to identify what work has already been done inside of it. So like Brian, I like his second scenario, and his second scenario is my primary scenario. I think that the Turkey Hill School is almost move-in ready, and let me explain what I mean by that. Obviously not quite, but it's a building that has a gym that works and meets that need, checks that box. It has a kitchen that's been remodeled and is currently being operated, and it checks that box. When you look at the first floor, it's had a significant abatement already on the first floor, with asbestos ceiling tiles have been removed. You have a lot of new plumbing throughout the building, which was one of the concerns that we had. Now the second floor of the building, though, does have asbestos ceiling tiles. Those would need to be replaced. That would be a cost. The second floor, the building throughout needs certainly an electrical panel upgrade, similar to what's the problem is at TC Passios. But because you have that kind of drop ceiling, bringing in more new electricity would not be as challenging inside that building, in my opinion. And it's also segregated on what is the campus, that it has a separate road to enter it. It's not part of the normal school entrance area, and it can be kind of partitioned off from the rest of that parcel, and it's not a big part of the parcel at that. Those to me are some of now you look at the boiler room. The boiler room is adequate in terms of being able to provide adequate heat. There's no AC in the building, but that can always be added in at another time. And one thing that I was looking at was how it can be phased. One of the cost issues that we came up with TC Passios was that anything that we were trying to do required us to touch half the building, which then triggered all these new requirements. And I think that the current Turkey Hill, could likely be converted, and that we could do it in phases. That it seems pretty straightforward how you can hit that building in sections. So that way you're not doing some massive renovation at once, but you're making it move-in ready for the departments. I also think that it's a building where you can, because it's designed for children, that there's a first and second floor on what is currently the art home ec end of the building that could be completely segregated off and separate. So that way you can have two buildings in one, where you can have a permanent home for extended day. That is, completely separate from the rest of the building. Yes, it will share the same electricity system and same heating system, but two different buildings essentially in one. And it seems to be affordable. Walking through there, looking at the challenges that we were going through with TC Passios, it seems that may be the way to go. On the buy-in side, although I personally think that the current location of TC Passios is an awful location for a future school, And I think that because of my background as someone who's been a police officer, physical security, I just don't think it's a good spot. But I also don't think that, I've heard many parents say it's a school campus, it's a school campus, it's a school campus. And I think that no matter what, that there's a hurdle here that we're gonna have to overcome. And how many votes do you lose because of plopping down in the middle of fields and everything else, a town hall? You know, I don't have a conflict with that, but I think that Turkey Hill is segregated enough that it could be seen as separate, and that the rest of that parcel could all be committed to school related functions. And then I think that perhaps the answer here is to pivot. It's to focus on the school committee building a new school at the location of TC Passios with a disposition plan for the town to take possession and use of Turkey Hill. There's obviously questions here about how to fund this. I know, and you know, how much funding can we get from the state to build a new school? And if that funding is there and available, to me, tearing down TC Passios, putting a new school there sooner than later, and then pivoting to Turkey Hill and making what, in my opinion, would be an even smaller investment in that school, to make it so that way we can easily move administrative offices over there, take out the functions of Ritter, and put the school department where Ritter is now. To me, that would be a solution that could work. Who's next? Peter.
So, do you guys mind if I share my screen?
Not at all. Do I need to make you co-host?
I don't know. No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Can you see that?
Starting to. Yes.
Okay. So I put these in instead of priority order, in order of when we should do them. And my reason for doing this is that, you know, part of my don't disrupt stuff already in place, I was mindful of in terms of how we deal with the musical chairs here. So the first thing that I would do if I were king for a day is make sure that we have a fully restored Ritter and Town Hall to the highest possible structural systems and access standards. And, you know, either through prioritization of capital planning or part of an initial exempted borrowing proposal. And I don't know what the cost is for that, but I think that that's achievable. I want to point out here that this is not moving walls and stuff yet, right? But just whatever we need to do in envelope stuff and systems, let's do it to the extent that we can. Second is to begin construction on a purpose-built municipal office building to house basically all the current town hall and Ritter functions. So treasurer, tax collector, assessors, town manager, select board, building department, board of health, conservation, accounting, IT, planning, town clerk, veterans, and facilities director. My Kentucky Windage budget estimate on this is a $10 to $15 million project for the tune of 15 to 25,000 square feet. And I also outlined 3 locations in order of priority. The first is 635 Massachusetts Avenue. You might ask, where is 635 Massachusetts Avenue? I would tell you to open the Google machine and type in Lunenburg Police Department. And you will get an excellent view of 635 Massachusetts Avenue, which is the dilapidated former marina that sits in front of the current public safety building. That property has one significant safety problem associated with it, the current public safety building, which is there's no secondary egress. So if a car accident were to happen near the entrance of that building and then a fire were to occur at my house or yours, the fire trucks would not be able to get to us. Purchasing that property in front of the public safety building and building a purpose-built municipal office building consolidates additional functions to include public safety. And I think we can make a nice small campus there that serves a variety of purposes and addresses the secondary egress problem that we currently have. My second option for this new municipal building would be 30 School Street, which is the soon-to-be vacant lot where the old primary school currently stands. And my third option is the current TC Pasio's property. Now, the reason why it's my third option is really the reasons that Michael Ray Jeffries just outlined around, the school campus issue. But also, if we put it there, we're going to disrupt the programs currently in that building. So in my view, let's not do that. Let's put it someplace else and let that building stand, serving some of its current functions for the foreseeable future. Third is retrofit Ritter to meet the needs of school administrative office space and maybe the ACE program. So at this point, everybody will be, the building departments and the land use departments will be moved out of Ritter, and we make that school administrative space and maybe the ACE program. I think that could be $1 million project if we're just looking at the interior. At this point, it's fully handicap accessible. All the systems are in place. We probably need to do some HVAC work once we make the walls from floor to ceiling. Third is to retrofit Town Hall for community meeting space. I believe that Town Hall should continue to serve municipal purposes, to include select board meetings and committee meetings, but that the first floor could serve a variety of different meeting space needs. And I think that that could be a fairly reasonable retrofit. Fifth is I think we need to build PAC a studio and office. I think we need to make that investment. And I think we can do that for $1 million to $1.5 million. And sixth, and again, these are in order of time, not necessarily priority, preserve TCP for remaining programming, meaning perhaps demolishing everything except the current cafeteria and the gym, and just using that for community space, or tear down the north section and keep the west wing, because we're going to keep school services in there for the time being, until such time as the school committee figures out what they want to do with that property in relation to replacing Turkey Hill. And my thinking there is, as other people have outlined, perhaps we put Turkey Hill in TC Pasio's space, or the space adjacent to it, the current Kids Kingdom lot. And, we build to what we need, we move into it, and then we demolish that which we're no longer using. And that could, by the way, also include additional gym space and additional cafeteria and commercial kitchen space outside of the realm of the building, the Massachusetts building program. Or if we built adjacent to it, we could still keep that gym and that cafeteria there for community use. Now, again, I did this with the thinking that how do we keep doing what we're doing while we build? I think that this service could potentially serve all of that, and also do so inside of a budget of, my finger in the air budget is a $20 million budget. Again, yet to be validated by anybody, but I think we could do all of this within that $20 million, with the exception, of course, of the replacement for Turkey Hill.
I can go if you want.
Yeah, I was sorry. I was talking as I was on mute. Thank you for that, Peter. And if you wouldn't mind emailing that to me, that'd be good. Brian emailed me his as well, and I'll make sure I get those out to everyone after the meeting. Mr. Roy.
Mine is remarkably similar to Peter's, but it has a couple of nuances. But I don't think they're significant, particularly in light of the fact that Peter said his was not necessarily a priority list or an order list. But my step one would be to build a new town hall, but that would include a space for PAC. I think that PAC has voiced the the need to have final permanent space. So I think renovating space in a building for them that might get torn down is probably not a good plan. So I think that if we're going to build a new town hall, which would be my king for the day scenario, that we would include them in that space. So by town hall, I mean the exact same things that Peter said. All of the things that are in Ritter and town hall, but I would also include PAC in that. Then step two, I would renovate the Ritter for school administration. And if that means we need to add on to that building or demolish a wing and demolish part of it and rebuild something for, something that preserves the historical nature of the building, but adds functionality to the building, then so be it. But it seems like that could be converted to a good town office, school office administration building. I should say also my town hall scenario envisioned using the School Street property. And under that scenario, I think you have connectivity as well. Again, they're different buildings, but you at least have some better connectivity between town offices and the school administration offices. You might even be able to do a shared parking scenario. They're at least walkable, absent of a major street. Step three would be to renovate town hall for meeting space and other possible rental spaces. So the first two uses I see as the first two things I said, town hall and Ritter, I see and school administration, I see as my top priorities, things that we have to provide and that we're sort of obligated to provide. Town hall, we're obviously obligated to provide meeting space and public meeting space, but I also see perhaps an opportunity to renovate for some leasable office suites maybe in there, or some space that could be leased so that we could start to generate some income from some of these uses that we, the model would be the town invests the infrastructure and the building, but we find a way to realize a little bit of a return through some leasable space. Maybe the Lions Club food pantry could be in that space. My point four would be to keep the school programs with the schools. So my idea would be to keep the after day programs and the ACE programs and things with keep those in the TCP building until such time as we think macroscopically about the school needs relative to Turkey Hill, and come up with a plan for how we're going to house all that, but keep all that stuff together with the schools on the school campus. As a sidebar to that, I would like to see I agree wholeheartedly that a huge amenity to the town of Lunenburg is our before and after school programs. I think they provide an essential service to the parents. I would like to see those become a little bit more sustainable. I think that, we might be able to look towards a model similar to what I just said about leasable space in town hall, where we can look to make those. Maybe we have to subsidize them a little bit, but maybe we can get them to more or less pay for themselves. And so we have sort of a leasing model or something that comes into play with those type of uses. I think we can still provide a good value to the parents of Lunenburg, but still make them at least approach sustainability, paying for themselves in a programmatic sense. So under those scenarios, then my fifth point would be the TCP likely becomes the new Turkey Hill location. Just going through I was on the committee to rebuild the middle high school project, and having a space in the back of the old high school where we could build a new building more or less with the exception of the greenhouse, completely outside of the footprint of the old high school. That didn't require us to look at temporary space or moving people out of or demolishing portions of the high school before it was out of service, was a huge benefit. So I think that if we were to proceed in the method, except for the after-school programs, we have to find ways of absorbing those into the existing school buildings. We could almost vacate TCP for a rebuild of the Turkey Hill School, and more or less build while Turkey Hill's in place, and realize that same efficiency that we realized with the middle high school project. And then I just went one step further. I think I'm a sports guy. I think we need fields in town. So I envision Turkey Hill as fields. I see that as somewhere we build some fields. We're always short on space. So I'll put that in writing, Mr. Chair, and I'll send that along.
Thank you, Mr. Roy. That I like what I'm hearing. So that I can certainly sign myself up for everything you just said. Christina, do you want to chime in here as well?
Sure. I think I went in like a completely different direction than everyone else did. The way I was kind of looking at it is, with the current climate, I don't really see a new build happening for town hall. So I was trying to figure out how best to reuse the building. So I took a look at the office space at Ritter and saw that it was like 6,000 square feet supposedly. And then I looked at all the town offices from the numbers you sent me, and it came up on their design as 82,000. Oh yeah, 8,200, sorry. But then when you really looked at the numbers, it was just kind of over, I think, like 6,700, but 1,000 of that was storage. So I was kind of looking to put everything town offices wide in the Ritter, which would then open the town hall. And I think kind of similar to what everyone has said at this point, I would just gut the town hall. It's not really good for anything at this point. It can't hold a lot of weight. So just opening it up to be used as a town space, kind of going back to like the farmer's market. What do they do when it rains? Let them go in there. When the Boys and Girls Club need extra space for activities, let them use it. Rent it out to people that need it. I don't think there's anything viable for that building anymore without doing a ton of upgrades. So that was my thought with that. And then the TCP, I can't stomach it. I don't know how other people are going to stomach it, but I can't justify paying for extended day in a brand new building or before school in a brand new, and I'm a mom, so it's my kids that are using it. But at $400 a square foot, it's a lot of money. So putting that in a new school, that's still a lot of money, unless you can find another purpose for it during the day. So then I looked at TCP and I said, well, they have the gym, and similarly, they have a kitchen. Well, that would take care of the lines. It would take care of Matt Allison, who's not here, and his farmers. That would take care of the rec program, because we don't really have a rec program in the town. But wouldn't it be great to maybe start one for little kids or kids and have leagues and a basketball court or a gym for them to use, and keeping the after school in TCP, but kind of demolishing the west wing and part of the north wing for the asbestos. And that way we don't have the overgrowth problem, because the school said they need 12,000 in total, but only 2,000 of that is actual offices. So the offices could be towards the back of part of the north wing, and the school services could kind of be towards the front. The only person I wasn't really able to account for was PAC. And I guess my problem with them is I kind of flip-flop and question, where would be a good location for them, because they have some very odd building needs. So then I thought, well, off of TCP where the garage was, because they said that would be an appropriate height for them, kind of separating that to some extent. We're getting rid of the buildings in between you don't need, and kind of giving it to them to make what they want of it and have the space designed their way, because that way they'd have the high ceilings and be able to expand or grow.
I like that feedback, Christine. You know, I work for mass development, and one of the challenges that we have, and I mentioned this at the last select board meeting, was that we're largely ineligible for most of the programs that mass development offers because we're a small town. And you know, whereas cities would be eligible for more. But if PAC were a 501c instead of someone a town entity, they would be eligible for a lot of funding that they currently are not. And it may be a conversation worth having on the town side with PAC of, is it advantageous to change that structure? And I know I'm saying this on TV right now, and people are gonna, I gotta minimize how much people jump on me for saying this, but I think that there may be a conversation worth having of, of really looking and drilling down what those resources actually are. And if it makes sense that we could do this more affordably if they were a slightly different structured organization. And having said that, today I was at Fitchburg Access Television, and I did a tour of their building this morning. And walking around their building, they are a 501c, I think that's what that is. They were able to purchase and secure a building with some community support funding. And I didn't ask them if it was mass development funding, but they're funded by a formula very similar to ours. Our formula is 5% of everyone's cable bills, and for Fitchburg, it's only 4.5%. But regardless, they've had this building now. They used to be located on one of their elementary schools many years ago on South Street, and now they have a building on Kimball Street, and it's a pretty large building. And they have 2 different studio spaces and a space for podcasting, and they have video editing suites for nonprofits. I think they had 3 or 4 of those, as well as a large conference room. So what I was seeing there was just so much potential, a full functioning public access channel, but in their own building. And I asked the question of how much Fitchburg specifically contributed to that building, and they said $0. So there may be a model worth discussing with them, depending on how that funding came about, that they may just be able to do it cheaper. So that's a really good, thank you for that comment, Christina, and hopefully I added some value to what you just said. So again, the purpose tonight is to get these ideas out here. If you can email me after the meeting, Dave Blatt, and everyone else, if you can email me your feedback after the meeting, that would be tremendously helpful. What I will do is put it all together and send it back out to you. And then I think at our next meeting is to kind of look at some commonalities. I heard a couple commonalities today. Ritter building for school offices. That seemed to come up by multiple people. There was another commonality of using 30 School Street for town offices. And although I personally am not a big fan of that, I think I've heard at our last few town meetings that that's something that residents want. And I think that although we did the survey that Mr. Beermore referenced, sometimes it's not about the numbers as much as it's about the strength of those numbers. That you might only have 25% that want something, but that 25% may make up 70% of who shows up at town meeting. And so, we have to be mindful of what the community wants, but also what the community, what can pass. So I think that at our next meeting, it would be beneficial for us to kind of look at some of these commonalities and see if there's any clear cut kind of this is what we all think. And then to marry this to the conversation we had at the beginning of this meeting about how we prioritize how to use these spaces. I know tonight's a lot of information coming out from us, a lot of good ideas. Does that sound like a good approach forward?
I'm fine with the approach. I actually have a sort of a technical question, Michael Ray,
Sure.
specific to your list. Do you have any thoughts in terms of for Turkey Hill? You outlined a potential reuse plan for Turkey Hill. And my initial thought on this is, okay, we're just coming at the school campus from a different angle. It was sort of my initial thought, yeah. Right? And it's still a source of skepticism for me, but if there's an opportunity to save a lot of money, then I think we need to vet that opportunity to save a lot of money. Have you vetted any of that in terms of like the structural and code, and like, do you have any thoughts in terms of, are we just running down the same path we ran into with TC Passios?
Yeah, that's what I was there looking for. And so a couple things are similar. One is that Turkey Hill needs a new roof, just like TC Passios has for the last probably 10 years. But we definitely need to put a new roof on Turkey Hill. That was one thing that I saw. I saw a cost in the asbestos abatement. I do think, looking at the building, some of the windows, you could see the asbestos caulking, you can see the lead paint on the exterior of the building, on some of those old windows. So certainly there's going to need to be a window project there. But plumbing, that was one of the things that we ran into, was plumbing at TC Passios. Well, this is a building that is notably younger and that has already had a significant plumbing upgrade. And so that is one less cost for us to have to worry about. Electricity, they have the same electrical problems that TC Passios and Ritter and Town Hall have, which is that the buildings weren't designed for current technology. And so, we have a lot more things to plug in these days. There would need to be electrical outlets put in. From what I observed in my walkthrough was that, based on the square footage of the building, my kind of from the hip thought was that the administrative all town functions could comfortably fit on the first floor of the building, that PAC could fit on the second floor, upper left-hand side, where what was, when I went to school there, was 5th grade. I'm not sure what grade is there now. I don't remember. But so when you come in, it's upper left side of the second floor, but that's plenty of square footage, I think, in my opinion, for PAC. And then to really segregate off the building and to separate that second floor around the bathroom points to be an extended day program of the building, as well as on the first floor, that kind of corner of the building as well. So that way you have a separate entrance for the building that is just the kid stuff. So looking at that, in order to bring in the electricity into the building, for sure, there's asbestos on the second floor ceiling tiles. All of those have been replaced on the first floor of the building, so that would be a notable cost decrease. And my thought about how you go forward with this, it's kind of like, if the goal is not to touch half the building, it seems pretty straightforward on how we can achieve that if we do this in a phased way. If we are just building a school and then we're doing a retrofit of that first floor to accommodate town offices, to me, that's just really straightforward move. To have kind of keep as far as extended day, we really don't have to convert much over aside from building barriers. So that way you kind of create that building within a building effect. That to me is not a costly thing, but it's a temporary thing that would need to happen at first, and then over time you build it up, and then it preserves the PAC project, that it gives PAC space to move into. And then we can decide, the town can decide if they want to fund it. So I definitely was walking through looking at how we could phase this in a way that would not trigger new code requirements. And then also looking at the really expensive stuff, boilers. Their boilers are pretty new. Where they're going to have a problem at is with the fire system. The fire alarm system is old. So that system's going to have to get replaced. But can you replace a fire system? You can replace a fire system throughout a whole building without having to do substantial work to trigger a level 3. So those were kind of my thoughts walking through there. And then also in the kitchen, I was really looking at the range hood, because that's a very expensive piece of equipment, as well as how many supply closets they have throughout the building, how many storage areas they have throughout the building. And how it could work if the idea of the new build was to have service counters, how that could work for the different departments. And it seems pretty straightforward to me on how that could work. That because you have that library right in the middle of the building, you almost can create somewhat of a U. But again, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I certainly saw a lot of potential with that building easily being able to convert over for municipal purposes and not having all the challenges that TCP presented to us. And then also, again, doing this in a way that we don't have to touch the whole building at once, that we just renovate the portion that the town needs to use, and then over time do the rest.
So just two more questions on this. I think it's an interesting idea, and I do think it's worth, figuring out if there's a cost-effective way to vet it. What about the like, it seemed as if we're spending a lot of money on steel in TCP because of structural issues. And you mentioned this level 3, and I'm not familiar enough with the triggering rules. In your scenario, would we avoid that scenario?
We would. So the reason for the steel was not really to address an existing problem. The reason for the steel was that once current buildings of that size, commercial requirements that they need to be earthquake proof. For all the earthquakes that we have here in Massachusetts. Seems kind of ridiculous. And it is. But so TC Passios would suffer, Turkey Hill would suffer the same issue, that they wouldn't have that steel to withstand an earthquake. But the real trigger, the reason why we hit that trigger at TC Passios was because of the plumbing system and the HVAC system. That knowing that those systems needed to be replaced, that there was no way we could replace both of those systems without touching a lot of walls, changing a lot of things. And then once you're touching half the walls, now you're triggering current building code requirements. I think that we can achieve those means. We can get to where we need to be, in my opinion, from my walkthrough. And again, more work needs to be done. It seemed to be more viable that we can get to where we need to be without triggering and what was $8 million of code upgrades. Because that of that dollar figure we had, 8 million of it was code upgrades.
Just one last question. And I haven't done a full tour of that. Both of my kids went there, but I haven't done a full tour of that building since I was in the 8th grade. The old industrial arts space, which I don't know what it's currently used for, and the old music room space behind the stage. What was your thinking in terms of the utilization of that space?
Yeah, I think that there's always going to be a need for facility related staff to be, and we just created a facility department. What's currently happening in those areas, so the old industrial arts section is no longer, they've taken that huge room and divided it into 2 rooms now, and it's used as kind of the office area and storage space for the maintenance staff.
Okay.
So continuing use like that, but for facility staff, I think would be a good use. And the one room I didn't go into because I said I didn't need to was the music room.
My reason for bringing it up, Michael Ray, was when you talked about PAC on the 2nd floor, in the context of that building, I immediately thought put PAC in the old IA room because it's high ceilings in there. And it's kind of built for that, industrial use.
Yeah. Unfortunately, though, it's right across from the boiler room.
Right.
Yep. And the boiler room is a 2-floor boiler room, and the 2nd floor has vibrating mechanicals.
Yep.
But PAC definitely would need, no matter what, they would need an elevator. And an elevator is an expensive upgrade. And there is one in the building. It could stay, but there would be a need for a new elevator if that were to be the plan. Dave, you're black.
So guys, just let me put my green community hat on for a second and let you guys know that Turkey, because of John Londa's work, Turkey Hill has received an amazing amount of state funding for upgrades. The man was a master at writing grants, a master at trying to find different ways to save money. So the boiler systems, he's already done all the variable speed pumps. He's actually upgraded all the LED lighting. He did the weatherization. All these things have already been paid for at Turkey Hill, type of thing. It's interesting because I didn't get to be like king for a day really for a moment, but my king for the day was I actually liked the TEP-based study where it showed a addition to Ritter to hold the rest of the offices. And it actually had school offices and everything in that between the addition. I won't go to try to throw it up on the wall and all that stuff, but I felt it was a neat little way. However, listening to the discussion from folks about the idea of using the middle school for these offices and letting the school be the school and do whatever they want with TC Passios, I think would be the best scenario to get through town meeting with. Because as mentioned, you can do it can be a commercial kitchen in there. There is a gym in Turkey Hill. There are all these other things there. And, it basically would probably have the least amount of disruption for the town as we did that, because we've already talked about the schools taking in the after-school care at a reduced size if they had to. But the idea would be is just trying to get as much as we can done for the least amount of money. The best scenario to me would be let the town vote to build a new school and let us work on slowly renovating Turkey Hill more than anything else. Now, that's my king for the day, and just the energy group, because the other idea is the energy group has done nothing to town hall because of it, just except for giving them outlets that they can switch off, and they don't even use that. So every energy upgrade we tried to do there, nobody paid attention. So we just decided to wait until figure out what this group says about it before we give them any more money, type of thing. So that's
just one other thought, Michael Ray, if you don't mind, just a question for Dave or anybody as we explore this potential scenario, which, tonight's the first time I've ever given this any serious thought. One of the benefits of the gymnasium and the cafeteria in TC Passios is its proximity to the Eagle House and the Boys and Girls Club. And so I just want to, and I don't know that there's an answer to this problem, but when we say a gymnasium and a cafeteria, that gymnasium and cafeteria is not a walk away, it's a car ride away. Unless we build a pathway for skateboards or something. But I want to bring that to your attention, that some of the benefits of the gym that sit at the TC Passios site are not going to carry forward to the Turkey Hill site.
I got a little bit of feedback.
So I have,
Christina, if you wouldn't mind, would you mind just saying that last portion again? And I'm not sure who's providing the feedback, but if you wouldn't mind just giving that one more time.
Yeah, so I just muted it and the feedback still seemed to be looping. So can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you without it now.
Yeah, so the only point that I was trying to make was that I think that the benefits of the gymnasium of TC Passios are particularly unique because of its proximity to the Eagle House and the Boys and Girls Club. And so when you lose that, and maybe this is something that the school department can account for when they go and build a new elementary school or something. But I think that that's something that we need to be mindful of as we vet this idea, because there's a difference between a walk and a car ride when you're looking at that benefit.
Okay.
so what I was going to ask is, I've never been to the Turkey Hill. I didn't grow up in Lunenburg. I know I brought it up when I first joined. Tony kind of brought it up here. If it was going to be a public / like community use building, is there a way to separate the sides? Because from what you guys are talking about, it seems like it's kind of centralized. So we would spend a ton of money in security trying to, or is it segregate? I've just never been there, so I can't picture
Yeah,
it.
there's
So
lots of entrances and exits in that building and lots of potential ways that you can route traffic. So I could actually see, as Michael Ray just outlined, I can see a number of scenarios that you could do that pretty easily.
When we had the community, if I could, Mr. Chair,
Of course.
when we went through with the architects over the last 18 months, security was enormous. Every other word we said out of our mouths was security. We knew that if we were going to co-locate school uses with community uses and town hall uses, that we were going to have to segregate that building. And so even the TCP building that we brought before town, the renovation project, had dividable, lockable spaces that would have, keyed access and things like that, and security features in it. So there's ways to do that from architectural standpoint. I think to Peter's point, I think Turkey Hill would be the same. I think there'd be ways of controlling the flow in that building.
All right. Well, I think this was a lot of conversation, and I think we have a kind of a plan forward. So next year we will pick the next meeting.
That sounds great. Motion to adjourn till 2023.
So at our next meeting, we'll certainly pick this conversation back up and really kind of take that critical approach to each one of these ideas and see what what works, what doesn't work, why it does work, why it doesn't work. And I think that in the end of this, it sounds as though we already have the solutions in our heads. And it's just a matter now of really walking through these scenarios and figuring out the best way forward, and then programming how we're going to, what we're going to do inside of these buildings.
So I have a question.
Yes.
So you're going to provide those. Sorry, Tony, I'm usurping your hand. You're going to provide those in some sort of condensed document. You do like scenario. How are you planning on providing them to us, and what do you expect us to do with them prior to next meeting?
Yeah, if you can just email them to me, just to be aware of what they are for discussion. I don't expect anyone to do anything with them, but yeah, I will compile them so that way everyone can see what the ideas are. Tony?
I won't go into the details of my King for the Day scenario. I have provided that to you as a separate document, Michael Ray. So others will get to see that. But I got three general comments. One is kind of connected to your comment, Peter, about the gym and the kitchen being connected to the Boys and Girls Club and Eagle. I think Memorial, one of the things that we heard 3 or 4 meetings ago was got to have a master plan and got to sell that master plan. And what I proposed in my King for the Day scenario is to look at Memorial Drive as kind of the Lunenburg community way. And with Town Hall on one end of the side, one end of the anchor, and the school and the athletic field, the middle school, high school on the other end of the anchor, and with all those things in between, we have the Eagle House, we have a little pocket park, we have the library, we have TC Passios, we have the green where we have the band concerts, and then of course, then you go into the middle and high school complex, which I think is a grand place. So I think that if you were trying to sell this to the voters, is that you say, this is the Lunenburg way, this is the Lunenburg community way. And it's I think a great corridor for us to have in terms of putting community facilities along that way. The second
Tony,
thing,
if I can just make a comment /
Okay.
joke. I think we can tell you're from Ohio and the planned cities kind of approach to things, because that's how it happens outside of New England, that there's planned approaches to what goes where. So
well, what's
interesting to hear that feedback.
Yeah, what's interesting, Michael, is that the town has done that. Eagle House, the Boys Club and Girls Club, the library. I don't think there was any planning that went into that process, apparently, because it was New England.
There was no logic. I can attest to there was no logic.
But it's all right there, which is really incredible. I mean, and I think that, I love your idea of taking a look at 635 Mass Avenue, because I think that piece of crap real estate in front of the public safety building is a detraction to the town of Lunenburg. Now you're starting to spread the community way to a different location. Second thing is, and I spent 25 years doing this, guys, renovating is always cheaper than new. And the only time I was allowed to do new was when Congress said you have a new function or a new activity and you can't use that old building to do it in. We're not talking about new functions. In fact, we're talking about basically maintaining functions in all these buildings, and renovating is always new. And one of the things that you always have to remember, even though there's things like earthquake reinforcements and there's code changes, is that when you get done with those activities, you might have spent some money that you didn't think that you should have spent because you were renovating the building. But just remember, you got cost of demolition if you get rid of any building in order to do something new. And those costs of demolitions are not inexpensive. And you got to do the same thing if you use a renovating approach. Like, for example, we had to spend money to remove asbestos at Old Primary School. And, whether you demolish it or whether you reuse it, that's a cost. And then you have the added cost of demolition. So my second point is, it's always cheaper to renovate. It invariably will be less expensive. And then the third thing that I'll say, and this is contrary to what, particularly what you've been saying, Peter, and what you've been saying, Michael. I agree. PAC has played a really important part for the town in terms of us being able to communicate, during the pandemic. And I think it's the wave of the future. I don't think we need a studio to do that. What we really need is good equipment to do the streaming that's required. The other thing is the town has an agreement with Xfinity Comcast that ends 2028. And I don't know what the future is going to hold, because there's a lot of movement afoot right now to have wireless internet. And that's going to affect what the town's new agreement will look like in 2029. And whether there's money there to support a studio, that's not that long from now. We're talking about 6-7 years. And I think that we should spend the money that Comcast is generating for the town right now to give us the right equipment to do streaming. You don't need a studio to stream. And all of us that are on this call today are a testimony to that. We didn't need a studio to sit and talk with each other. And I would really be cautious about spending $1 million or $1.5 million on a PAC studio. For whom? The citizens of Lunenburg want to be able to see what the town is doing. Do we need a studio to do that? So those are my 3 points. I have other details which Michael Ray will share when he sends out my sheet.
Well, thank you for those comments, Tony. I do hear you. I think that PAC, who may be listening to this live, is probably fuming, and they would definitely no doubt that they're going to send some feedback here. Let me turn a light on as well in my house because it's getting a little dark.
I'm sure I didn't make them very happy, but they have a big job for the town. Do they just need a studio to do that big job?
Yeah. So I know for sure that there are some other thoughts, and I see PAC over here sent me a message saying I definitely have some thoughts. So
Yeah, I have a completely different point of view on this. And I think that the way you think of community programming in a studio today, I think you're absolutely right, Tony, that it's probably going to change over the course of the next several years. But regardless, we are going to need space to house that equipment. There does need to be a central point that all of these various feeds come in and then get disseminated from. We're not going to change networking architecture principles in the next 10 years. I can assure you of that, although the cloud will have some bearing on this. But if we're putting
you will change it if you use Turkey Hill or TC Passios, because the agreement right now says that the architecture is based on a feed from Town Hall and a feed from the middle high and high school complex. Yeah, so you would have infrastructure that has to change to support.
Infrastructure will need to move. There's no doubt about it. But the principles of that infrastructure, if we're going to continue to broadcast on cable TV and stream and YouTube, are not going to change. And you're going to need space to house that equipment and maintain that equipment and operate that equipment. And then a studio on top of that. I think that there's a creative piece to this, that there are various community groups that would take advantage of if it was accessible and usable. And frankly, I think that, if you look at what's happened in Fitchburg, Michael Ray brought up Fitchburg, the amount of use that FATV and LATV, for that matter, both of whom have made substantial investments in their space through different funding mechanisms. The use has gone up multiple folds over the course of the last 20 years and will probably continue to. But my real reason, and we can argue studio, no studio, I think that's a fair argument. The underlying need for this, what I often talk about is, when we would have a select board meeting or a school committee meeting, or even a finance committee meeting for that matter, 25, 30 years ago, you would have a reporter in the room from the Fitchburg Sentinel and Enterprise and from the Worcester Telegram. now we don't even get meetings reported in the Lunenburg Ledger. Town meeting was not covered in the Lunenburg Ledger. So there's no media, there's no paid media anymore that will allow any citizen, when an issue comes up and they want to get to the bottom of it, they can either read the minutes posted on a website or they can go back and watch the meetings on YouTube. And the ability to sustain that infrastructure through multiple community organizations, a good example is what's happening with the water department. A few years ago, their meetings weren't televised or put on YouTube. Now they are. And there's going to be additional needs for that over the course of the next several years. And I think it's foundational to sustain our fledgling town democracy. And it's going to need public support.
I agree with that, Peter. I'm just saying you don't need a studio in a traditional sense of a studio with a high ceiling and lights, and lots of space and a place for people to sit. I think that we do need the equipment to make sure that we have a viable and robust capability to stream. The other issue is no one's watching the cable channels. People, I would be willing to bet if you look at the amount of people that viewed, the various meetings during the pandemic, they viewed them like I'm viewing mine and on a cell phone or on a computer. They didn't sit down in front of their TV. So I don't, let my comment be perfectly clear. I think that the PAC deserves the equipment to communicate the meetings that we have that need to go before the public. I question whether the PAC needs a public studio where people can come in and create a program, separate from the meetings that take place at select board or at the annual town meeting. And I think that maybe the solution, the compromise to, my divergent point of view with the others is that you say, all right, if we really think that there should be a community studio, then let's turn it into a private nonprofit. Let the town tap into their technological capabilities to broadcast a select board meeting or an annual town meeting. We don't use studios for that function. We use the settings for, at those two different locations. And then let them have, some support, some financial support for the town, but then let them go find the other funds using something like mass development to create that studio space. I'm sure there's a lot of good things that are happening at the Fitchburg studio, but we'll go back to one last thing here. What do the taxpayers want to support?
Yeah, and I think that that's a good point. I want to give Christina the opportunity to comment on this, but I think we're going to have to save the conversation on PAC for another day. Although I will mention to you, Tony, I'm always surprised at the amount of residents who leave public access television on. And when I walk out, and it's one of the benefits of not being a selectman is that you can have a beer and run to the store. Whereas if I have a beer and run to the store, it's supposed like I've been drinking all day. And everyone, and I wouldn't say everyone recognizes me, but I'm always surprised at the amount of people who do, and the people who come up to me who I've never seen at any public meeting ever, who say, "Oh, I watch you on TV." It happened to me at a subway at Hanscom Air Force Base. I went to a subway at Hanscom Air Force Base, and the person making my sub said, "Oh, you're my selectman. I see you on TV." And I was thinking, like, you must have me confused, But I'm always surprised at the amount of people that really do tune in. And I have many friends, many of their parents certainly watch it all the time. Christina?
So I was just going to say, I think we're kind of circling on this point, but people are forgetting or might not know that isn't PAC funding. They just want us to provide them a safe space, one that we're not going to kick them out of in like 5 years. And they have the money set aside in the budget to do everything. So I think it's kind of a discussion more so with them of confirming that and just finding them the space they need and then letting them retrofit it to their needs. And I understand, I don't have cable, I have YouTube TV, but at the same time, I watch the meetings on YouTube. And I don't think the town has an IT team that's suitable to take this over on their own. And why break something that's not, they're doing a great job. Why take it away from them? I don't know.
Yeah, we definitely depend on PAC and all of their resources. And I will say that they go above and beyond, with the live streaming, with on Facebook, on YouTube, integrated streaming platforms that they have to really provide to be as open, to provide an open government to our residents. I really do think that Pat goes above and beyond. I agree that there's some points, you know, I still am not sold on a kitchen studio, but I mean, I do think that there are some areas that, you know, that I can, after my walk through today, I will say, maybe we need to plan a field trip to Fitchburg Access Television. And I think it might help us better understand like what it is that PAC's trying to accomplish and do. With that said, I think we're kind of at an ending point here with our agenda. So let's see, next we have any communications from any committees. So it's discussion on committee communications and public outreach. So any correspondence to or from the committee from any other boards that we're aware of?
Could I correspond with the committee as the chairman of the finance committee?
Sure, sure, Mr. Beardmore.
So the finance committee in our last meeting, you know, began sort of a review of what happened at town meeting and the budget season over the course of the last year. And we're beginning to formulate what projects we're going to look at over the course of the next 6 months until we get into the next budget season. And one of the potential projects that we could potentially dive into is, of course, the funding and the budget for everything that we've been talking about for the last 2 hours. I'm the only one that put budget as my #1 priority, and perhaps that's because I'm the chairman of the finance committee. But the finance committee is not going to act without agreement from this committee, and for that matter, from, you know, the other committees that I've outlined. That being said, I think this is like a critical success factor. It's a pacing item. If we don't do it, we're going to fail. But I would like some sort of decision from this board that more or less endorses my #1 priority, which is come up with a budget that the key committees in town and the town manager agree to.
Can I say something?
Sure, Mr. Roy.
I agree that we need a budget. I completely agree with what Peter is saying. But I do not agree that it comes from this board, this committee. I think that the authorization to do that, you know, I think that the select board needs to step in here and say to our committee, and I'm, you know, you can quote me, you need to stick within the budget that the finance committee, that we're authorizing and asking the finance committee to give you. I just, you know, I think maybe the approach is we should ask the select board to intervene on that point. Because I just don't think it's in our, I don't think we can ask the finance committee to do that. I think that's the select board ought to. And maybe the town manager, maybe it's the town manager's purview, but I just don't think that it's our purview to ask the, I think we ask our governing body, which is our appointing body, which is the select board, to do that. But having said that, I agree wholeheartedly that we should have a budget. I think that I do agree with what Peter said. I think that's not having goalposts for this thing is the thing that derailed it, or put us in a position to made it not successful at town meeting. I think we need goalposts, and I think that that ought to come from the select board to the finance committee.
I hear you, Mr. Roy and Mr. Beardmore. So, and I agree in part, and disagree in part. So the agreement in part. One of the things, so many of you are aware that I am now the chair of the Lunenburg Select Board. And so one of the things that I worked on over the last couple of weeks while we were out of meeting is part of our calendar, and outlining what our calendar is every meeting between now and the end of the fiscal year. And what we're going to talk about as far as town manager presentations, select board presentations, and workshops. And there's a lot of things that are still to be determined. But one of the things is to walk through all of our policies and procedures, including our financial policies. And I think the current plan is for us to take another look at its Article 3 in our policies and procedures, which is all of our financial regulations. Because all, as Mr. Gerber referenced tonight, that 11% comes from the select board as far as, and so I think that we need to, and I think based on the calendar, which of course I have it sitting here, I can probably pull up and tell you when. But I think part of it is, and let me just see when we have it, in August, mid-August is when we will be looking at our financial policies and seeing if they need to be updated. Because I think that part of this conversation as well needs to be, are our financial policies the best that they can be for our community? Do some of these percentages need to come up? Do some of them need to come down? And I think that once we have that more informed conversation on the select board side of the house, knowing that we have a lot of debt coming down the line potentially, I think we'll be in a better position. We'll certainly be in a better position to have this conversation as we go into the next budget cycle. There's another part of this as well, which is, how we control costs as a community. And, something was said at the last finance meeting that I thought was, I've kind of taken it and expanded upon it, but it's an expectation and will be discussed at the select board. I plan on bringing this to the select board as we need to have a better inventory of all of our vehicles, all of our equipment, and understand every single thing that's on a cyclical replacement cycle and what its current lifespan is. And if we can be more methodical with how we, because I feel like some of this has been shooting from the hip a little bit, where we have one leader who says we need this, and this is $100 and something thousand. And then 2 years later, someone else says we need this, and this is another $100,000. That we need to have a more cohesive approach to all of this. And it really comes down to, where's the inventory? Where's the list? It's understandable that the town has grown and faster than perhaps we've been able to catch up to some of this, but it definitely is a critical requirement. So my hope is that as we go into the next budget cycle, that we will have a better grasp on kind of long range planning for our stuff. That being one part of it. And then also that we'll have another look at our financial policies to decide what these limits really are and are not. There's another component to this as well, which is senior tax relief. It's something that every member of the select board is committed to doing. And the bottom line of it is that it's finding ways to help keep seniors in our community. Many people who retired in the 90s, I have a friend who bought her house on Pratt Street for $28,000 in 1978. And when she retired around 2000, her family, how much money?
I think we just lost our chairman. You're muted, Mike. Dave, you're gonna have to take over.
Who's vice chair?
I was gonna say,
Vice chair.
so I was gonna
Vice
say,
chair.
he was probably saying, how much money is that house worth now? And do I really need all the room? So no, I'm only kidding. I don't know what his story about his friend is.
Dude. Yeah, he's really frozen.
Yeah, I think we lost him.
He's probably saying that they pay more in taxes now than what they bought the house for.
Yeah,
Well,
Yes.
I can attest. My wife works at the senior center, and it's hard. It's hard for folks. But to my point, I'm assuming Michael Ray will rejoin. I'm even willing to make a motion that we ask the select board to ask the finance committee to give us a goalpost for what this project should cost. I just don't think that we should ask the finance committee. And maybe I'm just totally out to lunch and this is just semantics, but I really feel that the select board should step up here and provide leadership on that point.
So just to be clear, he's coming back. He's coming back.
Now we're in trouble.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's back. You're muted though.
You're muted.
So that was like in slow motion because I could see me fading away. I could hear.
We lost you at 28. We lost you at, they bought their house for $28,000.
Yeah, I was trying to like make you chair real quick.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. But, Michael Ray, while we were, Mr. Jeffries, while we were while you were coming back to us, we were chatting about it. I think the idea is that the board, as a group, we would like to have it where whoever needs to set the goalpost, sets the goalpost for us.
Yeah.
You know, whether that's from the finance committee, whether it's from the select committee, it doesn't really matter. That the town needs to set a goalpost for us and say, okay, this is how much pain we think people can endure for this.
No, I
So-
agree with you on that one. I will bring, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I will bring that back to the select board. I was trying to articulate that I agree with you that I think it may not happen till we're in the end of the year though, as we get toward the fall time period into the winter. But that I do hear you and I agree with you.
I think that's
I-
okay, because I don't think we're gonna be spending any design development or even schematic dollars on this until we get funding. Presumably, the earliest that would come would be at a fall town meeting.
Well, but I
No,
do
We're
think
not
that
gonna be,
I think that, you know, as we zero in on our king for a day scenarios, whether we have 5 or 10 or 20 or $25 million is going to guide
it's true.
potentially these various scenarios that we go down. And if we want a funding article at fall town meeting, then we got to put the horse in front of the cart. And I think we all agree that coming up with a number is kind of the nose of the horse at this point. And I think that, you know, and maybe Michael Ray, this is something that maybe you and I take offline to synchronize our schedules or whatever, because there's multiple committees involved here. I don't really care. I understand your point, Greg. I don't really care who asks whom. I'm asking, you know, for some guidance in terms of, do I bring this back to the finance committee and do we jump on it and run with it? Or do we just sit around and wait? But as a member of this committee, everyone understands where my priorities are.
And I guess I'll go on record saying I agree with your priorities. I agree we need the goalposts. I just don't know if we should ask directly to the finance committee, but I'm perfectly willing to go on record saying that I think we need the finance committee to, regardless of who needs to ask the finance committee to do this, I think we need the finance committee's direction on this. And or the town's financial planning
Yeah.
consultant.
Financial policy comes from the select board and the town manager, and the finance committee, as I understand it, advises town meeting on how to vote on financial related articles. But certainly if you want to get the finance committee's endorsement and support, you should be working with them along the way.
Right.
So
I agree.
I do think that there's an opportunity here for that to happen. And I hear you that the goal is to identify kind of what this budget is, what these goalposts are. It is critical to this process, but I also think that we need more inputs, that we need to have somewhat of a vision first. Because I mean, you know, getting a budget of $20 million to getting a budget, if we say the number is 20 million, as an example, getting a budget of $20 million, but not having it clear enough on what that money is going to go towards, you know, may not be the right way. Especially if we end up saying that the approach is to go to a Turkey Hill and that the disposition of Turkey Hill is to become a new town hall and we're going to phase it in, you know, that may be too high.
That definitely changes the scenario in terms of how you do the calculus.
It does.
Absolutely. But
It does.
I do think though, Michael Ray, that it's a worthwhile exercise to run the numbers in the what I would call the predominant scenario, which is do Turkey Hill in 8 to 10 years. Even if we wind up flipping them, I think that it's a worthwhile scenario to run, or maybe run both scenarios. But you know, if we're going to stick to this 11%, and I happen to believe we need to, for all the reasons that you began to outline when you were talking about taxes,
Yep.
There needs to be some financial planning that keeps us within those bounds. And it's not just the elderly. You know, I pay my taxes through an escrow account attached to my mortgage, and my mortgage went up $150 this month. because of what my taxes have done over the course of the last 18 months.
Yep.
So, it's everybody.
No, I hear you. It is. It absolutely is. Okay, any other comments, thoughts on correspondence to and from the committee? Old business is agenda requests. Any action items? All right, we have not seen minutes in a while, and I will politely opine that one of the challenges that was articulated very well by the town manager was that we needed to have a minute taker.
We got minutes from Brian.
We have the minutes from, I must have missed those minutes from Brian.
Yeah, we got him.
All right. So, but we
Yeah,
are
I'm sure
missing,
Brian's doing it right now as we speak. Today.
we are missing, so we have not published minutes this whole year. That's problematic, and that's where I was going at. That part of, I think, the idea behind the town manager's push to have a note taker was that we would have staff support for some of this. Staff support is months behind, and so it's something that in my capacity I need to address and have addressed with Heather as a town manager, but we have not published minutes in a while. I asked Brian at the last meeting to start taking over the function again, so that way we can communicate to the public what our discussions are, but we need to resolve that issue as well. So we do have some outstanding minutes, and we have to be better at getting them out to the public.
So, Mr. Jeffries, Mr. Chair, what the person we had that was doing it when we called TC Passios, are they available still?
My understanding is yes, but I think I know this is a public meeting that's televised and being broadcast, so I want to minimize additional comments on this.
Okay, gotcha.
Should we
All right.
at least make a motion on the minutes of 5:16?
If you'd like to.
I move that we approve the minutes from May 16 as presented by Mr. Leighton.
All right, is there a second?
I second.
All right, all in favor, we're gonna have to do this roll call. Mr. Blatt,
I was not there, so I have to abstain.
Christina,
Aye.
Mr. Roy,
I
Greg,
wasn't there either.
Peter, we're not gonna have a,
We're not going to have a
Sorry,
quorum.
I was hoping Mr. Blatt was there.
would you like to withdraw the motion in the
I
second?
withdraw the motion.
All right, we'll try this at the next meeting.
Well, wouldn't you with Tony, yourself, Peter?
I haven't read them, so I can't.
Oh,
vote for them.
oh, okay.
You still need 4 votes.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
We had it. We had the 4.
All right, we'll hit this at the next meeting, but it is something that we're aware of. If anyone in the public is looking, we will get those minutes out, and this has been prioritized. I get it, and I want to be defensive a little bit of staff, but I do. But regardless, the expectation is that we post minutes within 30 days. So, future meeting schedule. Our meetings generally are on the first and third Mondays of each month. I noted on the agenda that an error. I noted June 20th. We'd already talked that not having a meeting then. So our next meeting would then happen in July because we have July the 4th. So this bumps us to like July the 18th. Is there an opportunity between now and July the 18th for us to meet again?
Could we
I
do
hope
the,
so, because I'm not going to be available on July the 18th,
All right,
but I would be the Monday before that.
that would be the 11th.
Yeah, I could be there.
Could we do the 27th?
27th, I can't be, but that's okay.
We
I
lose
mean,
Matt
actually, I might
Allison.
be.
Yeah, we lose Matt Allison at 6:45 because of the
Oh,
planning
right,
board.
right.
Which that will impact him on the 11th as well. So I think we can probably plan for a meeting and just trying to get the meat at the beginning of it, so that way he can participate in some of it, the discussion if he's available. So does June 27th work for everyone?
For me, I'll be in Germany, so
All right, you'll be in Germany.
it might be a little late for me to join at that point.
I'm
Midnight.
okay for the 27th as of now.
All right, Tony.
I'm okay too.
All right. So we'll plan June 27th. I'll reach out to Mr. Allison as well and Brian to confirm their availability, but we're planning for that. Any public comment tonight from the public? Any public comment from APDC? Tony?
No, thank you for allowing me to continue to participate.
Of course. And any public comment from any other committee members? All right, time is now 8:28 and I will take a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
All right, all in favor, Mr. Blatt,
Aye.
Ms. Masitas,
Aye.
Mr. Roy,
Aye.
Mr. Beardmore,
Aye.
Mr. Scullin-Brini,
Aye.
and an aye for myself. Thank you all and hope you have a good evening.
Thanks.
All right.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you.